Ask any rider what Harley used to mean, and they'll tell you freedom, brotherhood, grit. But today, that legacy is on life support. The company just posted a $117 million loss. Dealerships are closing, riders feel betrayed, and Harley Davidson may never recover. What destroyed America's most legendary motorcycle brand? And can anything stop the spiral? What's happening? This wasn't a bad week or even a bad month. It was the brutal confirmation of a collapse that had been quietly unfolding for more than a decade. In the fourth quarter of 2024, Harley Davidson posted a catastrophic financial loss. The company went from a modest $26 million profit the year before to a $117 million black hole. It stunned Wall Street. It rocked the motorcycle community. But for many riders and investors, it didn't come as a surprise. It came as a grim, told you so. For years, the foundation of Harley's empire had been quietly cracking. The collapse wasn't sudden. It was a slow, suffocating rot beneath the surface. Between 2014 and 2024, Harley's stock value plunged by over 65%. Shareholder confidence evaporated. Dealerships, once bustling with bikers and energy, now resembled ghost towns. In Los Angeles, one of the largest Harley dealerships in the nation shut its doors for good. In Florida, Taboo Harley Davidson, another cornerstone of the community, closed down permanently. These weren't isolated incidents. They were warning shots. Even worse, global motorcycle shipments for Harley tanked by over 53% in just 1 year. That's not a slip, that's a nosedive. U.S. revenue fell by 35% in the same period, triggering mass layoffs, operational freezes, and a cascade of canceled contracts. Behind closed doors, executives scrambled for explanations. But the truth was obvious to anyone paying attention. This wasn't a fluke quarter. Harley Davidson used to be untouchable. It didn't matter if the economy dipped or fuel prices soared, Harley riders showed up, leather-clad and proud, ready to invest in more than just a machine. They were buying into an identity, a myth, a brotherhood. But somewhere along the way, Harley stopped listening. It stopped innovating in the right direction. It stopped building for the people who built the brand. And when that happened, the cracks turned into chasms. The financial headlines were loud, but they weren't the cause. They were the result of something deeper, more corrosive, something Harley's boardroom either didn't understand or chose to ignore. And that brings us to the first root cause of Harley's downfall, a price tag that betrayed its core. But the financial bleeding wasn't the cause, it was the consequence. The price tag that broke the brotherhood. For decades, Harley prided itself on being a blue-collar brand, a motorcycle built for working men and women who live for the open road. But by 2024, that narrative had been shattered. The Sportster, once considered Harley's entry-level model, now started at over $16,000 before any customization, accessories, or basic upgrades. For context, you could buy a well-equipped used car, a zero-mile Japanese cruiser, or even a low-cost electric vehicle for that same price. Harley had priced itself out of the culture that made it famous. And it wasn't just the Sportster. The CVO Road Glide, Harley's so-called crown jewel, retails for over $45,000. That's not a motorcycle price, that's a luxury SUV. That's a family's vacation budget for the next 5 years. That's tuition. That's a down payment on a house. For the average rider, it became clear Harley Davidson wasn't just expensive, it was out of touch. Meanwhile, competitors were thriving. Indian Motorcycles offered its Scout model for just over $11,000. Honda's Shadow Phantom and Rebel 500 cruisers stayed well under the $10,000 mark. Yamaha's Bolt and Kawasaki's Vulcan appealed to new and seasoned riders alike, and they did it without making customers take out a second mortgage. This pricing gap wasn't just a marketing misstep, it was an identity contradiction. Harley called itself the bike of the people, but priced itself like a boutique brand for coastal elites. It sold rebellion, but only to those who could afford it. The result? Riders didn't just hesitate, they walked. Younger buyers, millennials, and Gen Z riders looked at Harley's prices and laughed. They wanted affordable, fuel-efficient, tech-forward bikes that fit their lives. Instead, Harley offered bloated cruisers with aging tech and luxury car price tags. For many would-be buyers, Harley's models weren't aspirational. They were irrelevant. Older, loyal customers, the lifeblood of Harley's legacy, also started turning away. After years of brand loyalty, even they began asking the hard question, is this really worth it anymore? For riders who grew up idolizing the Harley mystique, the pricing structure began to feel like betrayal. It wasn't a badge of honor. It was a brick wall. But here's the truth Harley didn't want to admit. Premium pricing only works if your product delivers. And for Harley Davidson, the next blow wasn't just financial, it was mechanical. But price only matters if the product delivers, and what Harley delivered made things even worse. This video is for the riders, the wrench turners, and the ones who still care. If that sounds like you, hit subscribe. We're building something real here. Broken bikes, broken trust. Imagine spending $30,000 and your bike breaks down after 30 days. That was the horror story facing thousands of Harley Davidson customers in recent years. Brand new bikes rolling off showroom floors were plagued with issues: cracked welds, faulty electronics, fuel gauges that stopped working within weeks. Riders didn't just feel disappointed, they felt betrayed. The Harley Davidson name was once synonymous with rugged durability, but as the complaints piled up, that reputation started to rot. Across the country, service departments began reporting a surge in new bike repairs. Dealerships struggled to keep up. Parts were delayed, problems were recurring, and worse, some of these issues weren't being fixed at all. Riders flooded forums, Reddit threads, and Facebook groups with horror stories. Photos of rusting hardware on brand new touring bikes, videos of dashboards glitching mid-ride, testimonies of owners bringing bikes back 3, 4, even 5 times for the same unresolved issue. And when they turned to Harley's warranty department, many found red tape instead of solutions. Claims were delayed, challenged, or outright denied. Technical language buried in fine print gave Harley the legal room to push responsibility back onto the dealerships. Dealerships, in turn, blamed Harley. Riders were caught in the middle, frustrated, ignored, and stuck with overpriced motorcycles they no longer trusted. Some said the quality control issues were growing pains. Others blamed cost-cutting or outsourced components. But to the average rider, it didn't matter. What mattered was simple. They bought a Harley because they believed in the name. They believed in the rumble, the craftsmanship, the Brotherhood, and Harley broke that trust. The brand wasn't just failing mechanically, it was failing symbolically. A Harley breakdown wasn't just a hardware malfunction, it was a heartbreak. But even if the bikes worked perfectly, many wouldn't have bought them. Why? The design made no sense. Designed to fail. How Harley lost its soul. Harley Davidson used to build machines that looked like freedom on wheels. They were heavy, loud, unapologetically aggressive. They felt like rebellion. But over the last 2 decades, that identity began to blur. And nowhere was that more obvious than in Harley's design language. It started with the V-Rod, a futuristic, water-cooled muscle bike meant to bring Harley into the modern age. But instead of exciting loyal riders, it confused them. The look was too sleek, too sci-fi, too European. For die-hard Harley fans, the V-Rod didn't feel like evolution. It felt like betrayal. Then came the Pan America, a competent adventure bike, technically speaking, but a design that looked like it belonged at a Silicon Valley Robotics Expo rather than at Sturgis. It alienated Harley's core audience, riders who didn't want a modular, angular bike that looked like an electric shaver. They wanted chrome, they wanted steel, they wanted grit. And finally, the Livewire, the all-electric gamble that Harley tried to package as bold and innovative. It was sleek, it was smooth, but it was soulless. It didn't rumble, it didn't roar, and it didn't resonate. The shift from muscular heritage to tech-forward minimalism didn't just change the bikes, it changed how riders felt when they looked at them. Longtime fans said it loud and clear, "This isn't what I ride Harley for." But nobody at corporate seemed to be listening. And that silence led to something far worse than bad reviews. It led to a brand-wide identity crisis. But this wasn't just a style problem, it was a full-blown identity crisis. From rebels to shareholders, Harley's identity crisis. When people think of Harley Davidson, they don't picture boardrooms, they picture back roads, they picture leather, grit, and the unmistakable roar of a V-twin slicing through the wind. But somewhere along the way, that roar was drowned out by the quiet hum of shareholder meetings and quarterly earnings reports. Harley's transformation from a rider-first company to a Wall Street-driven enterprise wasn't sudden, but it was devastating. The tipping point came when Harley went public in the early 1980s. On the surface, it seemed like a win. More capital meant more innovation, more factories, more scale, but it also meant a shift in priorities. Suddenly, the mission wasn't to build the best bikes for the most loyal riders, it was to increase quarterly margins, impress analysts, and hit stock targets. Slowly but surely, Harley's leadership stopped answering to the people who rode the bikes and started answering to people who had never touched one. This shift had real consequences. It didn't just change financial reports, it changed the culture. Marketing materials evolved. Instead of rough-edged ads built around freedom, rebellion, and brotherhood, Harley's campaigns became polished, lifestyle-oriented, and oddly sterile. The biker in the leather jacket was replaced by a clean-cut rider in tailored gear, sipping espresso outside a high-end dealership. The bike went from symbol to product. The ride went from experience to transaction. And the riders noticed. Blue-collar workers, veterans, mechanics, and longtime club members, the lifeblood of Harley's customer base, started to feel something they'd never felt before: ignored. These were the people who bought every generation of Harley, passed down their bikes like heirlooms, and kept the company alive during every economic downturn. But they looked at the brand and saw something unfamiliar, something sanitized, something corporate. The emotional fracture was subtle at first. Riders couldn't always put it into words, but they felt it. The brand no longer felt like theirs. It felt like it belonged to someone else, someone in a suit, someone who had never rebuilt an engine or ridden 300 miles in the rain, someone who viewed the Harley lifestyle as a demographic rather than a community. This wasn't just a branding issue, it was a soul issue. Harley didn't lose riders because it changed a logo. It lost riders because it changed its identity. It traded grease for gloss. It swapped culture for capitalization. It forgot that rebellion doesn't answer to shareholders. And then, in the middle of that identity crisis, Harley made another move, an attempt to attract a completely new audience. What they didn't realize is that in doing so, they would push their original audience even further away. And when Harley tried to reach a new audience, the damage got even worse. The EV Bet That Backfired. In 2019, Harley Davidson launched the Livewire, its first all-electric motorcycle. It was launched with a price tag north of $22,000. It had a limited range, long charging times, and perhaps most tragically, it had no soul. It didn't rumble. It didn't shake your bones. It didn't growl at the world. It hummed. Smooth, quiet, sterile. On social media and in bike forums across the country, the backlash was swift. Riders called it a Silicon Valley bike, a two-wheeled Tesla, a status symbol for urban commuters, not a machine for the open road. The disconnect was profound. Harley wasn't just releasing a new bike, it was releasing a new philosophy, and it was one their audience didn't believe in. The market was equally confused. Younger riders, the supposed target demographic, weren't buying. They saw the price tag and laughed. For $22,000, they could buy two brand new Hondas or Yamahas or a lightly used car and a smaller motorcycle. The Livewire wasn't just expensive, it was unjustifiable. It was Harley's worst instincts dressed in green paint. Sales were dismal. Dealerships couldn't move them. Inventory piled up. Eventually, Harley tried to distance itself from the failure by spinning Livewire off into a separate brand. But the damage had been done. The EV experiment didn't just fail to create a new fan base, it alienated the one Harley already had. And just when riders thought Harley might try to course correct, the company leaned even further into the cultural minefield. And while riders were still reeling from the Livewire, Harley dropped another bombshell. Woke branding, empty dealerships. As the cultural climate in the United States shifted, corporations across the country rushed to rebrand themselves. Harley Davidson was no exception. In an attempt to modernize its image and court a more progressive audience, Harley embraced a new set of corporate values: diversity, equity, inclusion, environmental, social, governance scores, climate impact assessments, social responsibility campaigns. But for Harley's core riders, this felt like a slap in the face. To many, it wasn't the values themselves that caused outrage, it was the execution. Riders weren't looking for political alignment from a motorcycle brand. They were looking for authenticity. They didn't want to be lectured. They wanted to be heard. Harley's ads began to change. Gone were the gravel-voiced narrators, roaring engines, and desert highways. In their place came polished social media videos, sanitized corporate branding, and curated inclusivity messages that felt more performative than passionate. To many longtime riders, Harley didn't just go corporate, it went soft. The backlash was fierce. YouTube channels, podcasts, and bike forums erupted with criticism. Riders posted videos burning their Harley merch, swearing off the brand forever. Dealerships reported plummeting foot traffic. Some franchise owners even broke ranks, calling out corporate leadership for driving away their best customers. And the worst part? These weren't just angry tweets. These were real people, real bikers, who had spent decades investing in Harley Davidson. The men and women who organized charity rides, showed up at every rally, built multi-generational loyalty, were now walking away. In its quest to become modern, Harley forgot who it was. And in doing so, it triggered an exodus that reshaped the motorcycle industry. Riders didn't just rage, they rode away. The Great Exodus, where the riders went. What happens when a legendary brand loses its grip on the community that made it great? Riders don't quit. They move on. And that's exactly what happened as Harley Davidson faltered. The motorcycle world didn't shrink. It shifted. Former Harley loyalists began gravitating toward brands that still spoke their language. Indian motorcycles, once a forgotten relic, suddenly found itself leading the charge. Backed by Polaris Industries, Indian doubled down on heritage, authenticity, and performance. The Scout became a breakout hit, undercutting Harley's pricing and outperforming its counterpart in both reliability and rider satisfaction. Others turned to Royal Enfield, a brand once mocked in the American market. Its retro designs, affordable pricing, and easy-to-maintain platforms drew in new and seasoned riders alike. The Interceptor 650 and Meteor 350 delivered the vintage-style Harley had abandoned, but at a price point that welcomed riders, not pushed them away. Triumph surged as well. The Bonneville series stole away riders who once bought Sportsters. Their bikes felt classic without being outdated. They delivered performance without a premium price tag. Honda's Rebel 500 and Goldwing lines exploded in popularity, especially among younger riders who wanted quality without baggage. Harley didn't lose to one brand, it lost to all of them. It wasn't a single takeover, it was a mass migration. Riders scattered across the globe, finding new homes on bikes that respected their intelligence, their money, and their culture. And as Harley watched its tribe disappear in the rearview mirror, something even more dangerous was happening just over the horizon. And while Harley watched its tribe walk away, its enemies circled closer. The last comeback playbook. In the early 1980s, Harley Davidson was already on life support. After being acquired by AMF, American Machine and Foundry, in the late 1960s, the brand spiraled into chaos. Quality collapsed. Production costs soared. Public trust evaporated. The Harley name, once a badge of grit and rebellion, became a punchline for breakdowns and lemons. But in 1981, something remarkable happened. A small group of Harley executives staged a buyout. They mortgaged their homes, risked everything, and took back control of the company. It was a bet no one believed in, but it worked. They reinvested in quality. They returned focus to American manufacturing. They pushed for tariffs on Japanese motorcycles and used the breathing room to rebuild trust. They leaned into the brand's outlaw identity, big, loud V-twins built in the USA, and it struck a cultural nerve. By the end of the decade, Harley had pulled off one of the most iconic corporate turnarounds in American history. It was gritty, it was improbable, and it was glorious. But that was 40 years ago. The world Harley faces now is not the world of the 1980s. Globalized supply chains, electric vehicle disruption, social media-driven brand perception, and a generational shift in buying behavior have changed the rules completely. Back then, Harley only had to worry about Yamaha and Honda. Today, it's fighting a war on 5 fronts. Against Indian, the Japanese giants, European disruptors like Royal Enfield and Triumph, Chinese newcomers, and an entirely new consumer base that doesn't dream of chrome and torque the way their fathers did. The old playbook was built for a domestic recovery in an analog world, but Harley's current collapse is global, digital, and cultural. In the 1980s, Harley needed to fix the product. Today, it needs to fix the identity. In the 1980s, Harley needed protectionism. Today, it needs transformation. In the 1980s, Harley was allowed to fail quietly and recover slowly. Today, every failure is viral, and every misstep is weaponized by competitors. What the past teaches is valuable. It shows that Harley's soul, when aligned with leadership and loyalty, is powerful enough to inspire a resurrection. But what history hides is the speed of change. The cultural relevance Harley once had is no longer guaranteed. Rebuilding will take more than loud engines and American flags. It will take a reckoning. The last comeback was fueled by belief. This one will require something far more painful: sacrifice. The old playbook is gone. Here's what Harley must do now. What Harley must do right now. Harley Davidson does not have the luxury of gradual change. It is not sitting on a pile of cash. It is not leading its category. It is not coasting on a loyal fan base. It is bleeding money, losing riders, and watching the global motorcycle industry evolve without it. If it wants to survive the next 3 years, Harley must act now and act decisively. First, Harley must slash prices across the board. Entry-level motorcycles cannot cost $16,000. Not when Indian offers the Scout at $11,000. Not when Honda offers its Rebel series at $8,000. Harley must return to the economic reality of its original customer, the factory worker, the fireman, the weekend warrior. Price isn't a strategy, it's survival. Strip the bloat, re-engineer value, make it so a young rider in his 20s can walk into a dealership and afford his first Harley without selling a kidney. Second, Harley must gut its corporate bloat. For years, the brand has spent millions on consultants, branding firms, focus groups, and corporate marketing campaigns that did nothing but alienate its own riders. Enough. Those resources need to be redirected toward engineering, design, and dealership support. The Harley showroom experience must be revitalized, not with LED lights and latte machines, but with real community, real service, and real riders. Third, the company must pivot its manufacturing back to the United States in a meaningful way. Outsourcing has destroyed the brand's credibility. A Made in Thailand badge does not inspire patriotism or pride. It inspires betrayal. Harley should not pretend to be American. It must be American. Even if margins suffer in the short term, the symbolic value of rebuilding domestic manufacturing is priceless. Fourth, Harley must recenter its brand on culture, not corporate messaging. That means cutting the DEI fluff and ESG jargon from marketing campaigns. That means putting real riders back in the spotlight. Not influencers, not diversity checkboxes, real mechanics, real veterans, real bikers. Show the open road, show the grit, show the brotherhood. Bring back the soul. And finally, Harley must launch a new line of entry-level bikes that aren't just cheap but legendary. These cannot be afterthoughts. They must be stylish, reliable, powerful, and proudly Harley. Think of the Iron 883 in its prime, or the original Dyna. Give young riders something to dream about again. But even with all this, even if the brand gets every decision right, the road ahead is brutal. The competitors are ruthless. The culture is fragmented. The timeline is tight, because this isn't just a corporate crisis, it's a reckoning. But even that might not be enough, because time is running out. The Blockbuster Parallel, there was a moment when Blockbuster could have bought Netflix for a measly $50 million. It passed. It believed in its stores, its name, its momentum, its legacy. And then, almost overnight, it disappeared. Not because it ran out of product, because it ran out of relevance. Harley Davidson is dangerously close to the same cliff. Its leadership still believes in the name. The dealers still hope the past will carry the brand forward, but the future doesn't care about nostalgia. The future is ruthless. It rewards agility, not legacy. Netflix versus Blockbuster is not just a story about video rentals, it's a story about what happens when iconic companies assume they're too beloved to fail. That same story is now being written. Harley versus Indian, Harley versus Honda, Harley versus Generation Z. What kills great brands isn't product, it's pride. Harley still has incredible assets, a powerful brand, a loyal shrinking base, and a legacy that could be revived. But legacy is not a business model, it's a burden. You can't ride on memory, you ride on relevance. If Harley fails, it won't just vanish from dealerships, it'll vanish from the culture, just like Blockbuster, just like Kodak, just like Sears. It'll be remembered only in coffee shop conversations and ironic t-shirts. The crash won't just be financial, it'll be spiritual. If Harley dies, it won't just be a brand collapse. It'll be something far deeper, the cultural funeral of an American icon. If Harley collapses, the ripple effects will be enormous, not just for dealerships, not just for workers, but for American culture itself. Thousands of small towns will lose their biggest employer. Thousands of mechanics, factory workers, and sales staff will be out of jobs. The biker community, the rides, the meetups, the charities will fracture without a flag to gather around. And what replaces it? More corporate sameness, more disposable products, more global blandness. There will still be bikes, but there won't be a Harley. There won't be that defiant American rumble that made the ground shake and your heart race. Without Harley, the idea of freedom on two wheels becomes just another commodity, something built to spec, shipped from China and stripped of meaning. We will not just lose a motorcycle brand, we will lose a piece of who we are. And we've seen this story before. When heritage brands fall, it's not just an economic event, it's a cultural funeral. It's the end of a chapter in the American story. Harley's death would be the death of a myth. The outlaw myth, the rebel myth, the myth that you could buy freedom on two wheels. So maybe the last ride isn't about the bikes. Maybe it's about us. Are we willing to fight for the things that matter, or are we too far gone? Harley Davidson is on the brink. If you've got a take on where Harley's headed, drop it in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns like this, hit subscribe. We ride through the truth no matter how rough the road gets.